Saving home. Chapter 1. The rhythmic thump hiss of the ventilator provided the only beat in Trauma Room 1. Fluorescent light, cold and unforgiving, beat down on the stainless steel and the exposed thoracic cavity of the senator's son. Kate McCormick didn't sweat, not visibly. Under the layers of blue sterile gowns and the tight grip of her gloves, her skin remained cool. Her breathing matched the slow, artificial rhythm of the machine beside the patient's head. To the team surrounding her, 3 residents, 2 nurses, and an anesthesiologist, she wasn't a person. She was an anchor, an immovable object in the slipstream of chaotic death. Suction. The word wasn't a request, and it wasn't a command. It was a fact stated into the air, and the nurse did as requested. The plastic tip slurped away pooling blood that threatened to obscure the field. Kate's eyes, deep brown and narrowed to slits of concentration, tracked the path of the jagged metal shard resting millimeters from the pericardium. A motorcycle accident on the Beltway brought her this patient. High speed with low survival probability. The kind of mess that usually ended in a time of death call 14 minutes after arrival. Not on her shift. She extended a hand, her palm open. Forceps. Metal slapped against her glove. With movement stripped of all hesitation, she reached in. There was no tremble, no second-guessing as her fingers worked with the precision of a Swiss watch. She visualized the anatomy not as flesh and blood, but as a schematic, a puzzle of plumbing and electrical wiring that required rerouting. She clamped the bleeder. The red tide slowed, then stopped. BP is stabilizing, the anesthesiologist muttered, the surprise audible in his voice. 90/60. Kate didn't look up. She didn't celebrate. She checked the suture line, verified the integrity of the vessel, and pulled her hands back. Checked the count. Close them up. She stepped back from the table, stripping the bloodied gloves from her hands with a sharp snap. The room exhaled, a collective release of tension that rushed out like steam from a valve. The residents looked at her, eyes wide above their masks, searching for a nod, a smile, a quote. Good job. Kate turned her back on them. Validation wasn't part of the curriculum. Excellence was the baseline. Survival was the bare minimum expectation. She pushed through the swinging doors into the scrubber corridor, the sudden silence of the hallway jarring after the cacophony of the trauma bay. She walked to the sink, triggered the sensor with her knee, and let the hot water scald her skin. Scrubbing out was a ritual. It wasn't just about hygiene. It was about washing away the chaos. The chaotic energy of her childhood, shattered glass, screaming matches, and the stench of whiskey had taught her that mess was dangerous. Mess was weakness. Here, she could wash the mess down the drain, until only the clean, hard truth remained. Dr. Eris Thorne, the chief of surgery, leaned against the doorframe, watching her lather the soap up to her elbows. They're saying you saved the kid. Kate rinsed her arms, watching the pink-tinged foam swirl away. The hemothorax was managed. The rest is up to the ICU. Senator Bradley is in the waiting room. He wants to thank the surgeon personally. She shut off the water and reached for a sterile towel. Tell him the team did excellent work. I have rounds to finish before shift change. Thorne chuckled. You know, Kate, a little glad-handing wouldn't kill you. It's good for the department. Good for the endowment. My job is to keep his son alive, Eris, not to help his re-election campaign. She tossed the towel into the hamper with a dull thud. If he wants a photo op, send him to plastics. They have better smiles. She brushed past him, the air shifting in her wake. She kept her spine rigid, her chin level. The hospital corridor was a gauntlet. Nurses tracked her movement, whispers trailing behind her like the wake of a ship. Dr. McCormick. The machine. She preferred it this way. Intimacy bred errors. Distance offered clarity. Inside the physician's locker room, Kate opened her locker, number 13, and began the transformation. The scrubs, stained with the residue of trauma, went into the bin. She dressed with the same efficiency she used in surgery, in crisp charcoal trousers with cream-colored silk blouse. Her blonde hair, which had been contained in a surgical cap, was released, brushed, and restrained again into a low, severe chignon, no strand out of place. She checked her reflection in the small mirror on the locker door. The woman, staring back, was impenetrable and impeccable. She was the only daughter of the McCormick dynasty, even if the name meant nothing but scandal in the gossip columns of 20 years ago. She had rebuilt the name into something that commanded fear and respect, brick by brick, suture by suture. She fastened her watch, a vintage Tank Louis Cartier around her wrist. Steps measured, phone silent, she exited the hospital. The sliding glass doors of the ER entrance parted, admitting the humid, heavy air of Washington, D.C. sirens wailed in the distance, the eternal soundtrack of the Capitol. A valet stood by the curb, holding the keys to her Audi RS7, straightening as she approached. Good evening, Dr. McCormick. Evening, Floyd. She took the keys. No small talk about the weather. No inquiries about his family. It wasn't that she didn't care. She simply didn't have the bandwidth. Every ounce of emotional energy she possessed was hoarded, saved for the moments when a monitor flatlined. The car door closed, sealing her inside. She didn't turn on the radio because the drive home was the decompression chamber. She navigated the streets of D.C. with aggressive competence, just like her surgical skills. The city was a grid of power and ambition. White marble monuments glowing against the black sky. She fit in here. She understood the language of power, but while others sought influence in boardrooms and Senate floors, she held the ultimate power, the ability to grant time. She pulled into the underground garage of the Watergate. It was a fortress with heavy gates, roving security, and cameras covering every inch of concrete. Privacy was the most expensive commodity in the district, and she paid a premium for it. Parking in her reserved spot, she grabbed her bag and headed for the private elevator. The ride up to the penthouse level was silent as she watched the floor numbers tick upward. With every floor, the armor loosened, just a fraction. The rigid set of her shoulders dropped, and the mask of indifference began to fade. The elevator doors slid into a quiet, empty hallway. She keyed the security code into the panel next to her door, a sequence she changed monthly, and the deadbolt slid back. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The contrast was immediate. Where the hospital was stark white and blinding chrome, her apartment was a womb of earth tones and texture. The lighting was low and warm, with rays illuminating the hand-scraped walnut floors. The sofas were deep, upholstered in soft chenille the color of toasted oats. Persian rugs, worn specifically to the point of maximum comfort, covered the wood. Kate engaged the lock behind her. The click echoed, signaling the final barrier between the world and Catherine. She dropped her bag on the entryway table. Her heels, torture devices after a 12-hour shift, were kicked off, left slightly askew on the rug. It was a violation of her own rules of order, but here, no one was watching. She walked into the living room, her feet sinking into the pile of the rug. The space was expansive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Potomac, the lights of Georgetown twinkling across the water. She didn't look at the view, though. The view was public. The inside was hers. Kate moved into the kitchen. It was a chef's kitchen, capable of producing 5-course meals, though it rarely saw anything more complex than toast. The countertops were dark soapstone, warm to the touch, unlike the freezing granite popular in the penthouses below. She bypassed the empty wine fridge. Alcohol was a slippery slope, a genetic landmine she refused to step on. Her parents had drowned in scotch and gin. She refused to dip even a toe in the water. Instead, she opened the pantry. There, sitting on the shelf like a holy relic, was a jar of peanut butter. Extra crunchy. She grabbed it, along with a spoon from the drawer. She didn't bother with a plate or get bread. She leaned against the counter, popped the lid, and dug the spoon in. The crunch was satisfying, a sensation that grounded her. The sweet, salty paste stuck to the roof of her mouth. It was childish and undignified. It was the best part of her day. Okay, she whispered to the empty room. The sound of her own voice, unmodulated for professional authority, sounded soft and vulnerable. She wandered back to the living area, tapped her phone, and connected to the hidden sound system that filled the apartment. She scrolled past the classical playlists, past the jazz instrumental lists she used for dinner parties. She landed on a playlist titled Simply Red. The opening chords of a Taylor Swift ballad filled the air. Kate McCormick, the terrifying surgeon who could crack a chest cavity without blinking, sank onto her couch, pulled her knees up to her chin, and hummed along. She closed her eyes. The image of the boy on the table flashed. The jagged metal, the blood, the panic in the nurse's eyes, the way the monitor had screamed. She pushed it away. She replaced it with the music. She replaced the cold metal instruments with the soft fabric under her cheek. This was the balance. In her sanctuary was the chaotic warmth she allowed herself only when the doors were locked and the world was shut out. The music swelled. She took another spoonful of peanut butter, staring out at the dark river, the fortress of her apartment holding the chaotic world at bay for one more night. She was safe. She was in control. Mostly.